Hey, Build Show, you got it. We are out here, another episode. How exciting is this? I know I talked about framing being exciting, but how about a first? Let's talk about Siparila Siding, thermally modified spruce, comes from Finland, totally pre-finished, 12-foot lengths, and we're putting it on the house. First time a color other than black and white by Siparila is being used. We also got solar panels on the docket, and we have the coolest deck joist to talk about. So let's get after it.
Multi-generational home on a budget. A Build original series brought to you by Zip System Building Enclosures, Fantech, New Wool, Bosch Home Comfort.
All right, so you can see we got a lot of siding done on this side of the house. Now, isn't this gorgeous, right? We're looking at Siparila Siding, and we have a couple pieces there. This is their Country Red product. Like I said in the intro, it's the first time they're introducing a color in America, and we're putting it here on the multi-gen project. Then we have their natural oil finish here, and you can see just how beautiful those two go together. They're both a thermally modified spruce. Yes, done in Finland, treated in Finland, shipped to America, and put on our house. So let's talk about the pieces and the parts. Before we put siding up, we got to do some flashing. So we actually have a pretty cool detail here. You can see there is, the siding comes down, there's probably about an inch gap, and then there's this kind of sloped fin. It does have a backer piece, and that goes back, it gets taped off and flashed to our zip sheathing. And then where we have horizontal siding, we have vertical batten strips or 1x3 furring here. It is not treated, and we'll talk about why that is when I go through the pieces. But you can see that piece basically traces around the bottom, and I have a piece of that right here so we can see that. So that literally gets put on the wall, and then we have that flashing. So anything that drains, remember, down and out on our rainscreen system is going to come down here eventually, get out. And the reason we put this fin on there, and you can see it has a little bit of a hemmed edge. You can see it on the back. Hemmed edge meaning that it just simply folds back on itself the full 180. It provides a little stiffness on the end there to do that hemmed edge. Plus, you don't see the cut metal like you would there at the end. When you fold it over, you can see on that hemmed edge, we get the true color of it. But by kicking that out on the slope, that inch and a half here, it's kicking the water out so it doesn't run down and then just literally run down on the foundation. And you know, with the Zip R9, that kicks it out a little further, but this kicks it out even a little further to the extent that it actually becomes a head flashing on our basement windows there, that we'll get those trimmed out. So that is our flashing at the bottom. We also, on the tops of the windows, we have a head flashing, and if I can just walk over here, you'll notice on all of our mechanical outlets, anything that's penetrating the wall here, we have the same head flashing here. So this goes in and goes up, you know, probably about 3 inches. And you can see the section here. There's that 3 inches that I'm talking about. And then this comes out over whatever device or thing we're trying to flash. And then there's a little hemmed edge there. And again, so we get to see that solid metal. A lot of guys, you know, they'll just cut that. They won't do that hemmed edge. And then when I'm over here and I look, I see this shiny little line across the bottom. So this is, yeah, maybe it's going the extra mile, but what client doesn't deserve the extra mile, right? So That's our flashing. That goes in back there, and that goes behind our furring strips, and then that simply gets taped to the Zip R9, which is our weather-resistive barrier. It's an integrated weather-resistive barrier. Now, here we chose to use a Modern Mills product, and you can see it's very closely color coordinated, but we can get that in large sheets. So we can cut it up, dial in each of the penetrations. You see here, we have our hood there for mechanical stuff. So it works quite well. So that's our flashing. Just gonna throw these down on the bottom here. So let's talk a little bit about the siding and the rain screen setup. I told you this is a siding by a company called Siparila. It has a wood textured rough finish here, right? So this is a 1x8. You can see it's got that tongue and groove there, so the other pieces, I threw the other one away, but if you wanted to put it, it just literally interlocks there with the other pieces of siding. And it's back cut, so lays nice and flat up against there. But even though it is pre-finished in Finland, we still want to put that on a furring strip. So here in New England, we do a lot of what we call ceiling strapping. And so these 1x3s, this is a pretty common. It measures probably about 11 16ths, sorry. 11 16ths, not quite 3/4 of an inch. And then about 2.5 inches there. So that will literally go behind the siding like that. And our siding will come across the top. And like I said, country red, Siparila. When we go to the oiled finish, this is just all natural spruce with that oiled finish, and you can see it's got certainly some knots in there, but same thing, it's tongue and groove, so every piece interlocks with the piece behind. It's back cut there. Now this is getting installed vertically, so if I took this and put it on the wall and then tried to put a vertical furring strip, well, that would work okay for this one board, but it does nothing for the 3 or 4 subsequent boards. I don't want to install it that way because any water coming down, I'm basically putting a dam in my drainage space. So for this, in the vertical orientation, Coravent makes a batten strip called sturdy batten, and you can see it's basically a corrugated, you can see right through it. So I can now install that horizontally, install my siding vertically. Let's see if I can hold this, right? And now water that goes down the backside can simply drain through the system there. As well as, remember, a lot of people fail to understand and fail to realize that the space in back, they think, oh, it's a drainage space, or where's the water gonna go? True, but I always say down and out, up and away, right? So by creating this vented space, it allows any moisture that accumulates inside the cavity or coming out of the wood, it allows it all to dry inside that cavity and get whisked away. Now, why is that important? Well, it helps dry out my siding, it helps prolong the life of the finish, but it is also the reason this doesn't have to be treated. I get that question all the time. I'm probably still going to get, 50 questions on should the batten strips be treated. No, because we're putting them in an environment where they can always dry. And if you watched our Build Science 101 series, where Matt and I talk about everything building science on a very fundamental level, one of the things we talk about is rate of drying, right? It's okay if things get wet, as long as they dry more than they get wet, right? So there's that tipping point. We need more drying than wetting. This is put in an environment. Will it get wet? Yeah, probably. Is it a problem? Hell no, because the drying rate far exceeds the wetting rate. And behind the siding with the interlocking tongue and groove, we're not going to get a whole lot of water back there. I mean, when I look at this wall, and people say, oh, what about all the water that's going to go through there? It's not like there's gallons pouring out the bottom of this wall in a rainstorm, right? I mean, that whole wall, you're probably talking maybe a couple tablespoons of water getting through the system and coming down the backside. So the drying in that case is probably as important, if not more important, than the draining capability of that system. Now, one last piece. You can see here on the corner, right, that there's a little piece, it's only about 1.25 inches on both sides. So what Siparila did was they took it upon themselves to create a little Z corner, right? So when I look at this, I have this is the inside, this is the outside, and this gets put on the wall and you screw in on that short side. But the beauty is, if I take this siding and I now install it, it can sit right up against there, and notice it fits in there quite beautifully, right? So that puts up, and it gives us a nice contemporary look on that corner instead of having big old wide corner boards. And then for the vertical siding, one of the beauties of vertical siding is we don't need a corner board. We take a little walk down here and we can pick up this corner. You'll notice the guys did a beautiful job here where we have a vertical piece there, vertical piece here, and they simply just put a miter in on it. And so this literally just folds around the corner. Now, we have a little piece up there. Why don't I jump up? We can talk about those batten strips and give you a short example. Like I said, I don't want to get too carried away with rain screens because I've done a ton of videos on it, and I have a lot more interesting stuff that I want to throw in this video. So let's hop up there. Let's take a look above the door. All right, so I literally jumped up. You probably don't realize that I do have a 63-inch vertical leap. I know, 160 pounds, 63 inches. I know, some of you probably don't believe it, but yeah, don't believe it. Anyways, jumped up here. Rain screen system. You could say here is our Siparila with our oil finish. These are the sturdy batten by Coravent. You see, they just get simply nailed on top of our zip system. The door is installed, proper zip flashing around. We also have our 5/4 frame that they made and then basically set on top of the door. And then our little metal flashing there, you can hear the knocking of the tin there. So that comes down our system. And then of course we have that air space behind here. So rain screen systems, you know, people always ask me, you know, what are some of the things that we should definitely do on our new home build? I don't care where you live, rain screen systems make the wall system extremely forgiving. So anyways, let me jump down and let's talk about the next feature. Very exciting. All right, so the last part of the siding just fell. It's almost like Mother Nature is calling me out. So yeah, this is also Siparila. This is simply a 1x3. Notice it is pre-finished on all 4 sides, thermally modified spruce. Now, how did we use that? Well, when we put it up in the soffit, you can see there is 5 boards equally spaced down the side. And what we did was we calculated an air space in between. So in the soffit, we nail up an insect screen and then we just put these boards and have, I don't know, probably about a 1/2 inch space in between. And it gives kind of a really nice ribbed feel. But when you step back, you notice we have a lot of vertical lines, we have a lot of horizontal lines, and then those horizontal lines of the soffit just reinforce this idea of lines on the siding. Now, to close out the siding, I want to mention Siparila. So 15-year warranty on the finish, right? The paint finish, not the product. The product carries a 75-year warranty on the product. So if you're looking for some siding choices for your next custom project, you might want to consider taking a look at Siparila. So, all right, on to some other fun stuff. Let's get going. All right, so, one of the things about doing this for well over 30 years, you get to see new things coming on the market all the time. The evolution of, say, the very first project I did, back in 94 or 92, to what we can do today, the materials that are available, it's crazy, literally crazy. And here's yet another one, right? So these are Icon screw joist deck joists. They come from Fasten Master, and you can see they are made to be like trusses, but the truss members are actually screws. They're not web members. They get screwed in from the bottom, you can see there, into the factory. They are a dual loaded threaded screw, so basically goes through the first hole, then taps into the top cord, and screw attaches to the bottom cord, securing these. Now, a couple really cool things about these. One, they already come treated on the top, so you don't have to put any special deck joist tape on top of the system. They're already done for you, and that's done at the factory, so they come out basically ready to install. But one of the other innovations is this dimension here. Believe it or not, it is a little, just a hair bigger than 7 1/4. Why does that work? Well, we can see here how they get installed. That top flange comes over, rests on here, so it's a top cord bearing flange. And notice the 2x8, it basically slides right over that. So we have the top cord over the top, it bears, and then the bottom cord is just slightly below that, and those are carrying the load. Now, surprisingly, when you look at their span charts, they are pretty darn strong. If we come over here, you can see we're going out, I think it's a little over 12 feet, but you can also install some solid bridging here. And notice the solid bridging, it's a 2x8 that's slid right down the inside of that member. We have a 2x4 top and bottom. They're all treated lumber, so it is a great system. Now, the decking that we're going to put on here, it is also a thermally modified spruce made by Siparila, and so we're going to be using their decking product on there too. But right now we got to concentrate on getting that frame in. So Icon screw joists, Fasten Master, extremely light. I'd pick one up and show you exactly how light, but I don't want to embarrass you all that I can throw those things around. So anyways, there you have it. Really cool innovation. Certainly the first time I've ever used these, but certainly not the last. All right, so this is kind of a little, I call it a special treat, but let's talk a little bit about solar panels. I have the owner from Isaksen Solar here, so let's meet Ryan. Ryan, how you doing?
Good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, so we got solar panels going up, but before we get up there and we start flying around drones and showing you solar panels, I think it's really important to, let me say, get a grip, right? Because I work all over the country, and you can imagine, Massachusetts is probably one of the easiest places to put solar on, make money, pay back, return on investment, all of those silly acronyms that I have to deal with in the comments. But if I'm building in, say, Alabama, where electricity is 9 cents, as opposed to, what is it here?
Total retail about 30.
Almost 30 cents. So it's probably 3 times the cost as it is in some places. So that just means if I can cut that cost down, my return on investment's that much quicker.
Exactly.
And I know Massachusetts, we're going to learn from you right now, but I know in the past we were at the forefront of rebates and such. I've had a number of passive house, zero energy houses where less than 5 years, the whole system paid for itself.
That's true.
And you know, it's warranted at the time for 20.
Yep.
So that means I get 15 years of what I call free energy. Now some of you are going to go, oh, this isn't free, you got to buy this, do that. But the payback period was less than 5 years.
Correct. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the program or what happens in Massachusetts. I call you, say, I'm building a house, I want to put solar panels on it. And you tell me.
Yeah, so on a federal level, no matter where you are in the United States, you're going to get 30%. So 30% dollar for dollar federal tax credit, not a deduction, an actual tax credit.
Okay.
So you have to have tax liability, but it is a real quantifiable 30% of the total cost.
Gotcha.
I mean, specific to Massachusetts, you do also get a $1,000 state tax credit. Each individual state has their own things, and then there is some utility rebates.
Gotcha.
Depending on, it depends on, because there's different utilities even within Massachusetts.
Yep.
But it's safe to say it's usually another $3,000 to $4,000 safely.
Okay. So we're probably somewhere in Massachusetts, at least, somewhere in like a 35K range, plus or minus.
Total cost?
Of no immediate rebate.
Yeah,
Or
around,
30%. It's just 30%, not 30,000.
Yeah, 30%.
So yeah, so 30% plus that. So
I would say it's around 45 to 50% of the upfront cost.
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll say roughly half of it. I like to round up. Makes it sound better.
Yeah, yeah.
So roughly half the cost.
Yeah.
Paid for upon installation.
Yeah.
Right? So let's talk about installation. Solar panels. They've come a long way. I don't want to date myself, but I think like the first solar panels we put in were probably less than 200 watts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? What are we talking now?
These are 425 watts.
425 watts per panel. The size?
So they're 45 by 65.
45 by 65, so just under 4 feet, a little over 5 feet.
Yeah.
465 watts?
425 watts.
425 watts.
Yes, sir.
And they also have, I mean, that profile is probably about an inch.
Yeah, it's thinner than it used to be.
So it used to be a lot thicker, and I'm guessing they're probably a lot lighter.
Yeah, so it's only about 40 millimeters now, which is definitely thicker. I mean, sorry, thinner. But they're actually, from an engineering perspective, they're stronger than what they used to be.
Gotcha.
So they've gotten skinnier, but also stronger. And one of the biggest things specifically with the panels has been that they used to be a 20-year warranty,
Right.
and now any really high quality panel is going to have a 25-year warranty.
25-year warranty.
So-
And so if my payback period is, say, 5 years, plus or minus, it means I'm getting 20 years of a warranted product that's working in my favor.
Exactly.
Right. And so these don't just go up on the roof and I just shoot a nail through them, right? There's an attachment process.
Yeah, correct.
And I know talking with you, there's some asphalt roofing companies that are very, very cautious about the attachment techniques.
They are, yeah.
And you've worked with some of them.
Correct, yeah, with essentially the two major ones, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do you have some of the ways these get installed, and talk us through that?
Yeah, so this is what pretty much everyone's used to seeing. So this is what we would call a metal flashing.
Okay.
These are a dime a dozen. There's really not much about this that's patented. There are probably 10 different companies that make some form of this. This is, in our opinion, the best one by them adding these ridges. It adds strength to it.
Gotcha.
And I want to be clear, we've probably installed 50,000 of these.
Okay.
No problems, they work excellent. Essentially, it's a simple concept. Anyone who knows roofs, you pry up the next roof course. There's usually a nail or two in the way. You have to slide this up. You bring your shingle course down to there, and then this has to get perfectly centered on a rafter.
Okay.
It takes skill. It takes skill to do, but if you do it the right way, it will not leak. So a lot of people say, well, then why are you not doing this still today? And the issue has been that the roofing shingles have got to a point where the glues that they're using are, they're almost too good.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with some GAF uses the term DuraGrip or layer lock.
Yep.
So it's specifically on this home, they have Timberline HDZ shingles.
Okay.
And the glue that goes on the shingle is so good that once it gets hot and cools down a couple times,
There's no prying.
there's no prying, no.
Not without damaging the lower shingle.
Exactly. So previously we had gotten essentially feedback from them. They actually published it that they wanted us to pry and use metal shingles. I'm sorry, a metal flashing.
Yep.
However, about 3 years ago, we noticed that we started, and I feel bad saying this, but ripping a lot of shingles.
Right.
When we would try to pry, even our best workers are ripping the shingles. So we actually tried a few techniques. So what we've tried was, we actually tried coming to the job site with the heat gun to heat up that glue.
To see if we can soften it a little.
It wouldn't soften it at all. We've tried saying, well, we're gonna come on the coldest day of in Massachusetts, let's just say 20 degrees. The glue's still hard as a rock. And then we've even tried using an oscillating tool to break that seal. We couldn't do it. We truly couldn't do it. So unfortunately, we had to go to a partner. We use a company called Iron Ridge, and they developed this product here specifically for that problem.
Okay. And is that self-adhering or?
Yes. So it's important to know, a lot of times when people hear the word flashing, they always think of a piece of metal.
Yep.
And that is true that 99% of flashings are metal. However, if you actually look up the definition, it's not necessarily metal. There are different types of flashings.
Yeah, there's flashing tapes and membranes and stuff. Yep.
Exactly. This right here is called a polymeric flashing.
Okay.
So there's a piece of EPDM foam underneath there. Again, this is called an Iron Ridge Halo Ultra Grip. There's a piece.
Say that fast 20 times in a row.
We call them hugs or halo.
Hug.
Yeah,
Hug. There you go.
Hugs. But there's a piece of EPDM foam there, and then there's this right here, the polymeric.
And is that tacky?
It's
Yeah,
very
that's
tacky.
very
If you
yes.
stick this, it's there forever.
Okay.
Now, this polymeric flashing, even though this has only been out for about 2 years, this company, Iron Ridge, is actually buying this from a undisclosed roofing manufacturer.
Yeah, everybody's got a bat cave.
Yeah,
I get it.
yeah,
I get
so-
it. So we're buying this stuff from the bat cave. We're installing it on there.
Exactly, and they claim that this has been in the wild for over 20 years. And what's very important is when you stick this onto the roof, if you just screw it in and let's just say you hit the rafters, perfect, nice, great. Well, a solar system is made of metal.
Yep.
All metal expands and contracts depending on temperature. So what's nice is that EPDM there, this actually stays, it doesn't actually harden.
Okay.
So it allows that little bit, I mean, I'm exaggerating when I'm moving that there. So that way, when it gets really hot and the system expands, you still stay
So I
warm.
would say it remains elastic. It has the ability to move like a rubber band, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Got it.
So we've been installing these for about 2 years. We have had 0 leaks.
Okay.
0. I am a very cautious person, so I don't want to say that this is what the future is forever, but with just how good these roofing shingle manufacturers have become, the days of prying are unfortunately numbered.
Gotcha.
And I know some roofers are going to be watching this saying, I'm just being lazy, my plumber pries when he puts the plumbing vent out. The difference is we could be installing 60, 70, 80 of these, right?
Gotcha.
So if it was just prying one, of course we would pry. But when you have 60, 70, 80, you're going to void that roof warranty.
Okay. And I see a number of holes. If we flip that around
Yes.
to the camera, so we obviously have to align those with it. This is quite heavy. I was surprised it's heavier than I would have imagined.
Yes.
And you have the little notches here, so you can align those with your rafter. But I'm assuming this, not only is it elastic, it's self-healing.
Exactly. It is correct.
Right. So when I screw through that,
Yep.
this stuff is kind of wrapping gunk around the screw and
Exactly.
sealing that hole up.
Yeah, and also the screw that we use just to be above and beyond also has an EPDM washer on top of it.
Okay, so you have a belt and suspenders approach that it's sealing at the bottom, but it's also sealing with that EPDM washer
Exactly.
on the top side.
And ideally what the goal is you want to hit that raft or a truss first shot,
Right.
So if you hit that raft or a truss first shot, you have to use these proprietary screws. Again, everybody's bat cave. But if you hit those 2 screws, you're good. No more screws needed. But unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. Right?
Yep.
You don't, you miss. So if you miss, then you have to do all 6
Damn
screws.
framers just don't put those trusses in the right spacing, right?
Yeah, even off by a half an inch sometimes. So then you go with 6. So we usually say about 95% of them will have 2 screws, but about 5% are going to have all 6.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
And they've assured us that using 6 screws into 5/8 plywood is as strong as using 2 into a truss.
Okay, so even if we failed, we have a fallback position of just we'll add screws to it.
Exactly, and
All right.
it's important to know everything I'm saying here. I'm only referring to asphalt shingle roofs. Any other kind of
standing
roof
seam metal, we shot videos on that. It's
Yes.
a totally different ball game the
Yeah.
way it bites. So why don't I grab this? Why don't you get what happens? So this gets installed on the roof.
Yep.
I'm assuming like that. So is Are these fins parallel to the slope of the roof or perpendicular?
So it depends on which way you're mounting, but typically they're parallel.
Okay.
Typically.
Okay. So parallel to the rafters, so they're like that.
Yep, exactly. And then
Okay.
essentially this is going to end up going over. It's a little difficult, but you have this channel. So I should just mention this is Iron Ridge XR100 rail.
Okay.
The shape of it makes it very, very strong by it not just being a
Gotcha.
rectangle. That belly adds significant strength. So if you live in a place that has high snow load, you really...
Or wind load.
Yes.
If I was putting these, you know, on the ocean.
This is significant overkill. So
Okay.
the way my company does it, this is what's called the XR100. You could have did what's called the XR10, but I like to go a little bit overboard. So this rides in that channel, and then eventually that will end up sitting on that. And then this rail is what the solar panels actually sit on.
Okay. And how do they get attached to this if I hold
You want to hold that?
Yeah.
So then a couple different ways, depends on where you are. When you're in the middle of the system, you use these. These are called UFOs, essentially. They're actually a part of the grounding there too. I should just mention that. You see these teeth bite in to help with the electrical grounding.
Yep.
But you haven't, you have one of these UFOs in the middle of every single panel, and they go all the way down. And then at the end of the system, we love the clean aesthetic look. So we use these things, which are called UFOs. So let's just imagine this was the last panel.
Gotcha.
The panel comes flush, boom. It's not gonna do it now, but when the frame is there, it bites in and you lock it in like that. So when you look at the edge of the system there, it is perfectly flush.
Gotcha.
So you'll see a lot of solar systems where the rail is sticking out about a ½ inch, and this thing right here is called a camo. So that allows you to have that flush look.
Okay. All right, so a couple parting questions, and then we'll definitely come. I know you guys have just started the install, so we'll be certainly back here in the future to check on it. But let's talk a little bit about calculating. What size system are we putting on here?
This system's going to make around about a 10 kW, 10 kilowatts DC, about 12,000 kilowatt hours a year.
Okay. And Massachusetts has an upward limit. I think they just raised it, don't they? Isn't it like 24 kW or something?
They did. So if you want to get what's called full net metering, which means for every kilowatt hour you give to the grid, you get a kilowatt hour back.
Gotcha.
There's no taking a little piece of the pie.
Okay.
That is a 10 kilowatts AC.
Okay.
But that actually allows us to go to about 20 kilowatts DC. Not to badmouth Massachusetts or anything, but about a year and a half ago, they passed a state law that it was being raised to 25 kilowatts AC. It has yet to actually been enforced yet.
Yeah, well, we're always slow moving on great decisions. That's part of life, I guess.
Yeah.
SRECs, do they exist anymore?
Yeah, so now they're called just RECs. They took the S out.
Okay.
Don't ask me why, but
and solar
renewable energy credit.
Credit, gotcha. So it's just renewable energy credit now.
Exactly.
So I guess if I put a wind turbine up, I can get a REC instead of an SREC.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And that's not just for Massachusetts.
Right.
So there's at least a dozen states that participate. So, but specifically in Massachusetts right now, you get a few $1,000s. You get a few $1,000s in a renewable, but that's over time. That's not an upfront credit.
Gotcha. And it's like an annual event, I think?
Oh yeah, you get paid once every 3 months for, I want to say about a minimum of 10 years, but it's longer than that.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Okay. And then last thing, calculating. Obviously we don't just walk up and go, 12 kW system will work.
Yeah.
What's the calculator you use?
So we use a variety of softwares, specifically on new construction. A lot of times we'll try to work with whoever is designing the house, try to get like a rough idea of what the loads are going to be. However, what I will tell you this is if you are building an all electric house, like this home has heat pump, hot water, induction stove, electric heat, or heat pumps, I should say. You're going to need every kilowatt hour you can get.
Yeah. So you're maxing out the roof before you're doing the calculation, probably.
Exactly. So in this case, we were already very quickly doing the math. I was already at the max roof space. Yep. So we don't keep going with the math. We just say, let's fit every one that we can.
Let's just get as many panels. Now, on the layout, is there a requirement? I know we used to be able to go, say, to the edge of the roof.
Correct.
But I think there's offset
Yes. So the I believe it's the 2020 building code, they began enforcing fire code setbacks.
Okay.
So now you have to have at least one 36-inch walkway. Let me first say,
Fire code setback, so a fireman could get up there and not have to skate on a panel.
exactly. So I'm a super nerd over the code. I'm probably one of the few people that actually has truly read this whole code.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of stipulations, a lot of workarounds, but at its core, you have to have a 36-inch fire walkway on the front of the house at minimum,
Okay.
and you have to have an 18-inch setback from the ridge.
Okay.
You have to be there. Now, it is always important to note that they put a line in that code that it is up to the individual town. So if a particular fire chief says, you know what, I don't agree with that.
Or if it's a one-story ranch and hey, maybe we don't need to go up there. I looked at the drawings. You can go all the way to the ridge or something, or petition to be maybe 6 inches into that 18 inches, gets us another row of panels.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And ultimately, it's always up to the town. They can choose to be, they could choose to be more difficult too if they want. They could say, no, it's going to be 36 inches from the ridge. Like particularly in the town that we're in right now, they allowed us to go closer to the ridge because there was other ways to get to that ridge from other mounting planes.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
we always try to push to get as much as we can and, try to get the client as high of an offset as possible.
I gotcha. So we're doing solar panels here, but beyond this house, I know you guys are qualified to do Tesla roofs.
Yep. Yeah. So we do a very large amount of the Tesla solar roof.
Okay.
The product it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. Yep. It's going to last a long, long time. It's essentially a metal roof.
Right.
But it's very important to note that that is not a 5-year ROI. That's a product for a client who is in a historic district or is just looking to have the most beautiful thing in the world.
So we don't have to get into the details, but I will ask the general question. Because that ROI gets stretched out, is it generation, or electrical generation that is stretching that out, or is it the cost of it versus panels?
The cost, yeah.
Okay.
The cost.
So getting that sexy look costs a lot more money than putting panels on. The production is relatively the same per square foot of production?
Exactly. So the thing is, the cells are slightly less efficient than on the solar roof than the regular panels,
okay,
but you can fit a lot more.
Yes, because you can go all the way in nooks and crannies up the valley, all that good stuff.
And Tesla did a good job of, they got the fire code setbacks eliminated. Just because the roof's made of metal, they're not going to be putting holes in it anyway.
Right,
so
right.
you can fit a lot more. I always like to say it's like comparing buying like a Porsche to Toyota Camry, right?
Yeah.
Toyota Camry's gonna have a better ROI. It's probably gonna, have a little less maintenance.
They both get you to the supermarket.
Yeah, yeah.
But one just gets you there in style.
Exactly, exactly. But if you're building your dream house and it's in your budget, it's a cool option. I like to even say, on my very own house, I have regular solar panels.
Yeah, and I think we're literally kind of at the cusp of the horizon for solar power. I was out at the Bosch show this past February. It's the building show in Europe, and I mean, they have standing seam roofs with integrated electrical panels and stuff. So those days are coming where the panel is going to be lost to systems integration on our roofs.
Yeah.
So
just a couple, just high level things to mention too is that, you mentioned around a 5-year ROI, and I will say that is true. Like even today, you probably, if you live in a state that has electricity around 30 cents, you probably could, and you could get a 5-year ROI. Our company motto is more so, I will say we're typically a little bit more cost up front. We're usually a 6 to 7 year ROI, but all of the hardware I showed you is all stainless steel or anodized aluminum. So it's
so it's not cheap stuff. You know what? You bring up a really good point, because the listeners here, they're not going to believe this, but I've literally done hundreds of zero energy homes.
Yeah.
And when I talk to clients, it really isn't about the ROI.
Yeah.
A lot of them just want their own personal energy independence.
Yes. Yes.
Right? They want to take their house and they want to cut off from the rest of the world and say, I don't care if oil goes to $500 a barrel.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect me.
Correct.
The only thing that affects me is, does the sun rise in the morning?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. It is about that independence, because you have security to know you're making your own energy.
Yeah.
Right? So ideally we try to make as much of it as possible, but it's not always possible to make 100%. But we have been doing more and more truly like net zero homes.
Yeah.
So it's just pretty nice. But
I think that's around the corner.
yeah.
Where all of this stuff is just going to keep getting better and better and more fully integrated. And I'm sure we don't have to get into it now. We'll return, but I'm sure you have all kinds of apps where I can talk about how much power I'm generating,
Yeah.
how I can feel good about what's happening. Hey, the sun's out. Let me see. Oh, look at me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and we install with every single system also a energy consumption system as well.
Okay.
Just because we want that client to have the transparency of like, am I going to get an electric bill? Am I not going to get an electric bill? It doesn't break it down. It's not as quite as nice as like a span panel where you're going to have that circuit breaker level visibility,
Yep.
but at least you have an idea of your overall consumption.
Gotcha.
And there's a million little tips and tricks. I mean, if you're somebody who's buying solar and you're retrofitting it onto a house, there's still things that need to be done that a lot of places don't do. But if you're doing a new construction, I mean, I could rattle off. I have a list of about 20, 30 things you want to do to make that solar system be great, but we don't need to get into everything.
I hear you.
Right
We'll let people call you and get you involved. So,
Yeah.
anyways, Ryan, thank
Yeah.
you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure the people watching here greatly appreciate your insight. I know you guys just started putting those panels on, so we'll come back at a later date and we'll see those panels up there running, and maybe we can get you back and we can talk about the app and talk about what kind of power we're making. So
Yeah, sounds good.
until another day, thank you very much. Well, there you have it, folks. We heard it from the man out at Isaksen Solar, Ryan himself, teaching us about solar panels. All right, so shooting. We can't bring you these videos unless we get partners in the industry to team up with us to ensure that we can bring you the best content possible. Today, I'd like to throw out a huge thank you to New Wool Corporation. If you're not familiar with them, 75 years in the business. Now, one of their stories that I think is probably the one that's priceless is 86% of their product is recycled content. Very, very little virgin content going into their products. So they're taking waste products and finding a way to bring it to you to use it in a useful, carbon neutral, carbon plus manner in your houses. And one of the interesting things that I just learned is that their manufacturing process is 1/10 of the energy that it takes some of their closest competitors to create their insulating product. So not only are they highly recycling it, but they found ways to be very innovative in their manufacturing process. And that means they're bringing you a really good quality product. Let's talk a little bit about their products. You might know them, they're most famous for their loose fill insulation. Yeah, it's cellulose. It's recycled paper, cardboard, it's treated with borates, so it can handle the fire, it can handle the sound. You saw that we're using it in acoustic situations as well as really good thermal situations as part of our thermal barrier. And not only do they give you the blown in cellulose, we can use this as loose fill in the attic like we did here. We can add a little bit of moisture at the nozzle, put it in the wall as a damp spray cellulose, or we can net and blow this stuff in and get a dense pack situation, all of which yield right around that 3.8 per inch. If you want to move to a bat situation, then they make these EcoCell products. They make it in a 5.5 inch bat, they make it in a 3.5 inch bat, R13 and R20 respectively. Now the beauty of this, I'm sweaty, it's hot, I've been out here all day. I'm not gonna sit here and be full of irritants, right? It's healthy, you can put it in your house, you can put it in the baby's room, and we can ensure that the family lives happily ever after. If you're looking for special situations, they have their EcoSeal blanket, comes in 1.5 inches and 2.5 inches. This is really good. You know my detail where I do the foundation wall and we hold off the framing that 1.5 or 2 inches? Well, here's your solution. You can put this in, it's hydrophobic, it's pretty much all natural, nothing in here that's gonna harm the family. You can put it in, it can wick the water, drain the water, dry it out. It is a great solution if you're looking for those alternatives to using other insulation products. So probably one of the things that you didn't know, I didn't know it, was that there is a 10-year guarantee by Newell, an energy guarantee. When the project is done, this project specifically, they are going to give a not to exceed price, and if the energy bill exceeds that price, Newell will pick up the difference in their guarantee. Not many insulation companies are willing to put their mark on what they say. Great thanks to Newell. Not only did they team up with us, they sent their whole team out here. You saw it in the video. I had Heath out here explaining everything. We went up to the factory. We saw how this stuff gets made. We talked to all the important people there on what they're doing to bring you the best product they can bring you.